Hey everyone, let's wrap up March. March has seen a lack of videos again, and I'm trying to get better, but I noticed that I had struggles or problems putting my thoughts together cohesively and talking in general. So there were no videos, apart from my letter to the months and one reading vlog. And I'm quite happy about that one, and I love your comments on that and also my letter to the months because I finished reading The Magic Mountain. And it's been a struggle. I talk more in detail about that in my reading vlog, but overall, I finished that big chunker of 1,000-page plus German classic that I honestly still don't really know what it wants to tell me. I read up on a lot of the themes and the ideas that went into it, and I think I understood more of it, but I don't really know. From reading it, I think the writing was very funny. There were parts that I really enjoyed. It's all about the story of Hans Castorp going to the mountains to visit his cousin in a hospital for tuberculosis for 3 weeks, and he ends up staying for 7 years for various reasons, which is explained in the book, and the novel really looks into detail into the time he spends there, into philosophical and political and social ideas. There's a lot of characters, people coming, people going. We see Hans Castorp changing and evolving or not evolving. And in general, a lot of things went into the book. And I think a lot of things went over my head because I didn't have the background knowledge or the references, and I kept falling asleep a lot. Nevertheless, it was an interesting read. I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed vlogging it. So that's the only video you got. But I finished more books, so let's talk about those. And let's start with the last book I finished, which was The White Sargasso Sea. I read that because I wanted to read more classics. I've always been hearing about this, wanting to read it, and it was really short, which was nice after that long book. But I noticed that I don't really care about the book. I just finished it this morning, and I realized it is the expansion of the story of Mr. Rochester's wife, the one in the attic, his first wife, in Jane Eyre. And you get a breakdown of their story in Jane Eyre. So this is an expansion and background to the wife, the life she had before, the life she had with him, and also ending with them being in England. And even though it is well written and the story in itself is not bad, I noticed I didn't care, mostly because I think I already knew the story, and it's not like with other retellings that I was interested in the retelling or in the events that happened. I was just reading it because I thought I want to read it and would enjoy it, but I didn't as much. That doesn't mean you won't. It's a nice book. It's well written. It has a lot of interesting aspects that are separate from Jane Eyre, with the look at their life in Jamaica. Another short read I read while I took the break from Magic Mountain was Kundo Wakes Up, which is the companion novel or the sequel to Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday. And I really enjoyed this one. This was another different take of a city run by AI and how life changed in the future, where we're basically have ruined the environment. So if you haven't read Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday, in that world, an AI called Karma runs cities, and you get karma points for different things that you also pay with. But you also have your basic needs met when you just live. So you don't have any real worries as to how to get food and shelter and things. But the problem with the world is that the air is basically polluted, so people are needed to make breathable air. It's all about nanobots and things that we have in our body to keep us healthy and things like that. In the first book, there's a lot where we see a city, Kathmandu, where everything works wonderful and everybody's happy. In this city, I forgot the name, we see things more from the desperate side, where Karma isn't doing such a great job. There are many parts of town where the air isn't great. The city is built near a river or the sea, and so water is coming in and it's rising. Water levels are threatening livable places of the city, so that's going down. So basically the environment here is threatened and not taken well care of, and even if you are a zero and you have your basic needs met, it doesn't sound as comfortable as it did in the first book. Kundo Wakes Up mostly follows Kundo, the main character, who's an artist, and his wife, disappeared, ran away, got lost a few years ago, and he's trying to find her. So it's more the quest for him searching for his wife, and a lot of things happen on the way. It's really fascinating. I really enjoyed the ride, and it made me think about more of these basic needs met and what we want from life, what our goals are, and what our aspirations are if things are nice or not. The only other two books that I read and not listened to were the two novellas in the Dragons and Blades series, which are a companion spin-off series to the Dominion of the Fallen. So if you don't know, in this series there is a world created in Paris with an underground dragon empire or kingdom in the Seine, and above there are fallen angels, and everything is ruled through a magical war. These two novellas are little murder mysteries with the dragon prince and the fallen angel visiting the dragon kingdom and things happening. They're fluffy, light, fun, fast-paced, and you can read them without having to have read the whole series that they're companions to, because you completely understand the stories. And I think you can even, it doesn't really matter in which order you read those two stories. They're both entertaining and I really enjoyed them. The reread was fun. Okay, now let's get into the list of audiobooks that I finished, because I managed to finish a lot of audiobooks because some of them were really short and I had the last week of March off, so I could go on long walks and I was out a lot, so I had a lot of time to listen to audiobooks. So let's get the most boring one out of the way. I listened to a collection of short stories by Anton Chekov, and even though they were well narrated by Richard Armitage, I enjoyed the audiobook, but I didn't really enjoy the stories for enjoyment's sake. Most of these stories were rather oppressive and gave you a mood or a sad mood feeling. The atmosphere was bleak, and I took away that I need to listen to happier things, which I did for the rest of the month. I would recommend the audiobook if you are interested in this collection of short stories. It is well done, but if you're in a bad mood, sad mood, maybe pick up something happier, just like I did. I finally decided to give up on reading The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea and went for the audiobook, which was a good choice. The audiobook is really, really well done, and it helped me breathe through the book, and it was really what I needed. It is a retelling of a Korean folktale myth, something like that, about a sea god who is rather moody, and the people of the villages along the water sacrifice women to him as the sea god's bride to appease him and make the waters and the rivers and the weather better. Things like that. And this story follows a young girl who is not actually chosen as the sea god's bride, but she wants to save her brother and his love, who was chosen as the sea god's bride, and jumps into the ocean herself. And then we follow her trying to save the sea god, break the curse, and make everything better. It's a little romance in there. It's a fun story. I really enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed the characters, and it was just what I needed. A really positive, good mood book. After that, my pre-order for the Mimicking of Known Successes came in, and I didn't really know what it was about, but I enjoyed the previous series by the author, so I was very excited and I wasn't disappointed. It is a little mystery as well, with a creative world setting that I can see being expanded if there are more books in the series with the same detective. The book starts with someone going missing, and the detective needs to go to the place where she studied, to her university, and meet up with an old lover to help her figure out what happened. And it's a crime. The mystery gets solved. The two people, the interaction between those two characters is lovely. The writing was lovely. I really enjoyed it, and the world building is also rather interesting. So maybe there will be more, and I'm looking forward to that as well. I also listened to one nonfiction book this month, Fifth Avenue 5 a.m. And it's a book all about Breakfast at Tiffany's, the novel and the movie, and the people surrounding or involved with it, the ideas that went into the novel, a little background to the times and also the position of women in that time and the people who inspired the novel, and then also how the movie became a thing or came to be, and how the changes were made, the people involved, and also some of the meaning it had for women in general in that time, and also a little bit of a background of what movies could do with sex in movies and the reputation of the actresses and things like that. I thought it was rather well done. I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook. I also think I forgot a lot of the content that already happened, but it was really interesting, and I have read and watched the movie and I always liked it, so having some background information on both was very nice. So highly recommend that as well as an audiobook, probably good as a book as well. The last two books I finished were sort of connected and not connected. They both dealt with idol worship in pop culture. Idol Burning is a Japanese novel where we follow a young teenager who really worships a pop star in a J-pop band, I would guess, and how that affects her life. In Idol Burning, we see the events start with the pop star hitting a fan and how that affects his life, his career, but also we see everything from the perspective of the young fan who is really involved in the fandom. She has a blog where she talks about events that happened around there. We hear a lot how her life related to the fandom or being a fan, how that affected her life. We see a lot of what fan culture in the pop culture, K-pop, J-pop area is about, and the interactions that the fans have with the band, the single members, and also the money that is created through that. But we also see a lot of her life, and I thought this book was really pointing out how this young girl was not very well functioning like the society expected of her. She really had trouble learning, and she also had trouble staying clean and nice and put together. The novel nicely juxtaposed how she was really a mess in her private life, but how she was really organized in her fandom life, that she really was well organized in keeping track of everything that her idol was concerned in her blog, in the different things they said and references. She was well organized for that, but her school career was really a mess, and how all of that created tension in her family. And it was really interesting to see the effects that this obsession had on her life, but also how her life lacked purpose without that fandom, and how everything affects her, especially when her idol did something that ruined his career, basically. YN, on the other side, also deals with idol worship from an older person's perspective. We have this woman at the end of her 20s in a connection or a situation where she knows a lot of people in her 30s who are studying, writing PhDs, are very intellectual. And she lives in Berlin at that time with a flatmate who is into K-pop and this one band. So she takes her to a concert, and at that concert, the woman just falls in love or gets obsessed with one of the singers. And then we see her being dragged into this. In the beginning, we are still in Berlin, and we see her interacting with her boyfriend and other people, and how they are looking at all this fandom and the obsession and the pop culture that it's developing, and looking at it from an intellectual, analytical point. And that was really fascinating. But we also see a lot about this woman and how she tries to find her identity and find love for some reason in the relationships she has. But I also, this is the part which I cannot really put a point on. I also have the feeling that she didn't want to be like everyone else all the time, that she constantly said, but I'm not like that. And even in her obsession, which really turns her into writing fan fiction. And when the group breaks up and her idol decides to leave the band and retire, she really gets lost a little bit and decides the natural thing to do is to go to Seoul and look for him because of their connection. And it's a little bit like she lost her sense or connection to reality, while at the same time she's really, really connected to what she's doing. The book is narrated in a rather surreal, strange way, and you find yourself reading the fan fiction she writes, which is the YN part, where you have in the fan fiction, apparently, if you want to write a story where the reader can be the main protagonist, you write YN, which stands for your name. And so that's a story she writes, and that's something we get interspersed into her real story, how that evolves. And it's kind of commenting on each other, and it's rather interesting. And I enjoyed the book. I thought it was fascinating to have this look at idol obsession and what it leads people to do. And just like with the idol burning, we have this woman who is really finding a purpose in her life and ignoring everything that is not going well in her real life by pursuing this and thinking this is the love and the connection she has with this person. We always see her thinking that she has a personal connection to this idol, and it's fascinating. I really recommend reading both of those if you're interested in seeing perspectives of idol worship and what it can do to people. And I also liked, in comparison, I didn't really plan reading it like this, but we had this teenager, how it affected her life, but also we see this adult woman in her almost 30 years of life still falling for someone and being obsessed and leaving everything behind. Fascinating. Okay, I hope all of this makes sense. I noticed while talking that I'm having trouble stringing thoughts together and putting them together, and I hope while editing it really comes to point what I said. I highly recommend most of these books that I read. I actually had a really good reading month. I enjoyed all the books and felt the accomplishment of finishing The Magic Mountain. So let me know how your March was, and if anything I've talked about you've read before or liked or are interested. Let's talk books. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.